I'm Stuff reporter Philip Matthews, and this is my review of 2020. It was a year in which we queued up, a year in which we danced, and a year in which we really thought the world was coming to an end.
2020 has frankly been terrible.
It started with scenes out of the Book of Revelation. This was the sky on January the 1st, a sky as orange as the face of the President of the United States. Australia was on fire, and here was New Zealand, more than 2,000 kilometres away. You know what they say, orange sky in the morning, frankly terrible year warning. There was climate change and there was cancel culture. After nearly 6 decades of devoted public service, one of New Zealand's creepiest old white men was finally removed from public view. Auckland's giant creepy centre was taken down for the last time. Could it get any worse? Of course it could. It did. COVID-19 had been discovered in China at the end of 2019, so the early months of 2020 were an exercise in waiting for the inevitability of its appearance in New Zealand. Life went on as though there was nothing to worry about yet. A large and carefree crowd lined up when a new burger outlet opened in Auckland.
First of all, mate, how long have you been waiting in the line in this hot sun for a burger?
Since about 10 o'clock this morning.
Worth it, you reckon?
100%.
Give us your thoughts, mate.
Mediocre.
People danced at the Splaw Festival, utterly oblivious about what was to come and how long it might be before they danced in a crowd again. As we waited for the virus to reach us, 2020 introduced a new protagonist, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. Every disaster movie needs a scientist who warns us of danger, and ours was the boyish, sensible Director General of Health.
We haven't yet had a case here in New Zealand. However, our assessment is the likelihood of us getting a case is high.
New Zealand went a bit weird about Bloomfield, if we're honest. They put his face on tea towels and shower curtains. Do you really want to take a shower with Ashley Bloomfield watching? We got our first COVID-19 case at the end of February. Bloomfield was joined by former Health Minister David Clark, who may have ridden his mountain bike to the big announcement.
New Zealand has become the 48th country to identify a case of COVID-19.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern quickly showed us that she was the one source of reliable information.
Facebook is not necessarily a good source of information or social media, and I really just want to again just reassure people, seek the advice that is verified and that is coming from experts.
She even offered health advice to journalists.
You should deal with that sniffle, Paddy. I'm a bit worried about you. Overseer.
As the country closed its borders, New Zealanders rushed home.
How does it feel to be back?
Great, awesome. I'm in New Zealand. Everything's good.
As we went into lockdown, it was like a scene from The Quiet Earth or thousands of other apocalyptic movies. We baked cakes and waited for Ardern and Bloomfield's 1 p.m. updates.
I feel like I did well, but I got really good at making things like, Malaysian curries and fermentation and baking good stuff. Just have to make sure you exercise, otherwise you're going to get a big post-lockdown belly.
It was a good time to be an introvert, but lockdown was tough on extroverts, such as this talkative parrot in a closed wildlife reserve who missed human company. And the only people dancing now were COVID-19 nurses in full protective gear. We went from queuing for burgers, to queuing for groceries, to queuing to have something painful stuck up our noses. Here was a journalist taking one for the team.
And 3, 2, 1.
It wasn't much fun. I did not enjoy it at all, and it did sting a bit, but it was very, very manageable.
New Zealand's first COVID-19 death was a woman in her 70s who died in Greymouth on the 29th of March. By the end of November, we had 25 deaths and only about 2,000 cases. There was no doubt we met the COVID challenge more successfully than other countries. And when the nationwide lockdown ended, the Prime Minister celebrated in her own way.
I did a little dance. Definitely not. I showed Neve. She was caught a little by surprise, but she joined in.
I've been described by one commentator this week as intense, but I did allow myself a broad smile.
COVID-free New Zealand became something to aspire to overseas. This meant that enemies of Donald Trump used New Zealand as an example of everything his COVID management wasn't. And here is Trump himself revelling in the good news when New Zealand got some more cases.
But they like to compare us to others, so they were talking about New Zealand. New Zealand, it's over. It's over for New Zealand. Everything's gone. They're beautiful. They had a massive breakout yesterday.
But Jacinda Ardern fired back.
Look, I think everyone can see that in New Zealand, today we're talking 11 cases, whereas the United States has been dealing with over 40,000 cases.
There was one thing we did share with the United States in 2020. Just as Black Lives Matter protests swept American cities, so they also swept New Zealand cities.
We must say together, Indigenous lives matter. Baloch lives matter. Muslim lives matter. Black lives matter.
I can't breathe. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
Black lives reduce to hashtags and black squares, tears in the eyes of mothers. The pain is heart aching, talking all lives matter when all lives ain't taken.
Statues of slave owners were pulled down in America and even the UK. In New Zealand, we cancelled the guy the city of Hamilton was named after. Historic warmonger Captain John Hamilton became as shameful as Auckland's centre.
Who do I reckon deserves a statue? Nah, we kind of need to right a few wrongs before we go chucking up more statues. That's not the answer here. The answer is actually addressing the systemic racism and oppression of tangata whenua in New Zealand. We get so caught up in the statues, in the protests, in the whatever, we're only looking at the on the superficial level. And it's like in order to actually address these wrongs, we have to dive in deeper, collectively, and that's not just them versus us, it's like all of us really examining our past and why this is a fight for us today, because it is.
Justice was also served in other ways. There were emotional scenes in Christchurch when the mosque gunman was sentenced. But rather than providing the gunman with another platform for his hatred, the sentencing became an opportunity for family members of those killed to talk about the impact of the atrocity. Ahad Nabi, whose father was killed in the attack, went viral.
I would like to say that my 71-year-old dad would have broke you in half if you challenged him to a fight. I'm strong. And you made me even stronger.
But this scene, where a Muslim woman was consoled to the very New Zealand soundtrack of How Great Thou Art, was just as affecting.
My Savior God to me. How great thou art. How great thou art.
The government's success with COVID-19 guaranteed that Ardern remained popular. And while she steamed on mercilessly towards the election, the national opposition rearranged the deck chairs. Simon Bridges was dumped in favour of Todd Muller. Bridges happily went back to tending his yaks. But the change of leadership quickly proved disastrous.
I joined the Labour Party rather than the Labour. I joined the National Party.
And to breaking news, National Party leader Todd Muller has resigned.
So National settled on yet another dream team, led by Judith Collins and Jerry Brownlee.
I think it might be time for a drink. What do you think, Tim?
As COVID restrictions kept touring rock stars out, we had to rely on local politicians for our entertainment. MP Paul Goldsmith treated a Nelson audience to Elton John's Rocket Man. Live comedy had also been cancelled, so again, politicians did double duty.
You said when you were Minister of Corrections, no one escaped under your watch. Is that true?
Oh, there was the odd one who might have popped out, but they all got caught.
So why did you say no? So why did you say no one had escaped?
I think, Toby, you want to actually understand a joke when you hear it.
When can we determine that you're joking, and when can we determine that you're being factual?
When my eyebrow goes up, it's a joke.
David Seymour revived the ACT Party by adding hot pink to the official colour palette and appealing to new constituencies like gun owners, free speech campaigners and people with a strong interest in ancient Greek history.
You can go back to the Athenians and say, have you seen anyone like Jacinda Ardern? So good at marketing, so bad at delivering. And I'm sure the ancient Greeks would say, no, we've never seen anyone that bad in the history of democracy.
And then there was Advanced New Zealand with these two and their interesting questions.
So what we need to do is ask the questions that aren't being asked now about why that weapon, that virus got out. How did it get out?
We should have known their campaign would go bad when their launch climaxed with the most shocking version of Tina Turner's Simply the Best ever performed. But this wasn't the United States. And while these and other nutty ideas might have been popular on Facebook, they didn't win many votes in reality. Still, election night did deliver some surprises. Labour won more than 50% of the vote, the biggest ever result under MMP. Energetic Green MP Chloe Swarbrick won the hotly contested Auckland Central race.
How cool is that?
And a cause she backed almost single-handedly to legalise cannabis nearly made it through the so-called referendum. But cannabis lost and euthanasia passed, meaning you can die, but you still can't get high.
Thank you very much.
Weeks passed before the world could finally say, it's over for Donald Trump.
Are you being a sore loser?
Trump now goes off to join Captain Hamilton and the Auckland Santa in the Museum of Cancelled Old White Men. No, hang on. Santa has found a new place to dwell. They moved him and his creepy finger to a hole in the ground in Wanaka, and they plan to rebuild him. Okay, so that was 2020. How was it?
Mediocre. I think it might be time for a drink.
It wasn't much fun. I did not enjoy it at all, and it did sting a bit, but it was very, very manageable.
So what does it all mean? We expected the end of the world and it didn't happen. Maybe we're better prepared now for when it really does. Maybe we've developed a better appreciation for the things that matter and can see through the would-be tyrants. We're more clued up about their weapons of disinformation. In the meantime, play us out, Paul.